You get so many objections that it almost feels like a red flag if the customer doesn't bring up any, am I right? And you need the skills to address them to progress and close the deal. What you need to know is that objections tend to fall into one of 5 buckets. It's either a lack of need, urgency, budget, trust, or authority. In this video, we'll cover what the top 5 objections are that you should be prepared for and how to overcome them. By far, one of the most common objections you'll face in sales is that the customer has no need. In practice, it can sound something like, "We already use one of your competitors. We already have a system in place that works perfectly fine." Or, "We just accepted the call to find out what your product is all about." You probably already guessed that you should expect this to come up whenever you book a meeting with a prospect from outbound. I use a simple 3-step process to overcome this. I start by educating the prospect on what their peers are doing. I clarify whether I'm on the right track, and then I tell a story to inspire them to take action. It can sound something like, "Usually when I talk to persona, they're either focused on X, Y, or Z. Does either of these match your priorities right now? Which one resonates more closely with you?" Once you know what their priorities are, one of the best ways I found to inspire prospects is to walk them through a customer story where I explain how someone similar to them already achieved the impact that they're looking for. I remember talking to this customer who had a clear pain, but they didn't perceive it as such because the previous solution was way worse. I had to educate them that no other customer of mine stood for such bottlenecks, and I walked them through a specific customer use case on what was the problem that they were facing and how our product impacted their business as a whole. You could immediately tell from their expression that they were impressed, and even though they didn't end up upgrading, they said they wouldn't shy away from it later on, so we succeeded in creating the need. The second most common objection I come across is the customer telling me that there's no fixed timeline for the project. It tends to come up whenever the prospect is early in the buyer's journey, they perceive that they have higher priorities going on right now, or they don't have a good enough understanding of what the problem is and how it impacts the organization as a whole. In practice, it can sound something like, "We don't really have a deadline for this project. Better sooner rather than later, but it's not that urgent." Or, "We want to solve this ASAP." Note that in enterprise sales, ASAP can even be 1 year, and it's best to clarify rather than expecting a quick close. The best way to overcome this objection is to help them uncover the impact and then have them internalize the cost of inaction. You can then inspire them to take action by sharing a customer story, just like when you're creating a need. Once you've uncovered a clear impact, you can move on and find out what the critical event is. The critical event is something that will happen in the near future that has negative consequences attached to that should they fail to meet a deadline. If you're finding it difficult to make good progress here, your best bet is to ask for a follow-up call and loop in someone more senior from their team who has a better understanding of why they're doing this project in the first place. Not so long ago, we were consulting with this prospect who wanted to scale their systems. They told us that there's no clear deadline, but they'd rather be done with it sooner than later. We ended up looping in the economic buyer, and after a series of questions found out that they have an upcoming license renewal in 6 months, and if they don't implement something by that deadline, they're either gonna be stuck with the same scalability issues or have sunk costs. We ended up closing the deal in 4 months. Now, I bet you're already familiar with pricing objections, but what if they demand to know the price even before you had the chance to do discovery? You know, questions like, "We just want to know the price and we'll get back to you later." Or, "I want to know the price first and see if it's even worth having this discussion." There are 2 cases when I've seen this come up. Either the prospect is in elimination mode, so they're early in the buying process and you're not one of their preferred suppliers. They already have a chosen supplier, but they're required by compliance to ask for multiple quotes. Or they perceive that they have all the information at hand already and they just need the pricing to make the final decision. I would advise against discussing the price before running a discovery call, because even in the best case, you'll end up selling something that doesn't meet the customer requirements and they'll end up blaming you. Your best bet is to push back and explain to them that the price depends on what their requirements are and the impact that they're looking for, while reassuring them that by the end of the call, you can discuss what pricing would look like roughly for them. If they're being pushy, you can call them out by saying, "Usually when I talk to customers who just want to know the price and not discuss the project, they already have a vendor in mind and they're just looking for another quote. Is that what's happening here?" This is a really good way to uncover who your competition is. If that's not the case, you can tell them a wide enough range to keep them interested and explain that to narrow down the price, you need more background around X, Y, Z. To give a personal example, we were approached by a previous customer of ours who changed from a smaller company to a larger enterprise to solve a specific problem. They already had a plan in mind with a low price point, but through discovery we found out that that wouldn't meet their need. 6 months down the line, not only did we end up closing the deal value went from $10,000 to 6 figures. If you're enjoying this video, do me a favor and smash that like button so I know you made it this far, and subscribe for weekly content like this. I usually say that you need to talk to at least 5 stakeholders in the project to maintain a grip on things throughout the sales cycle. And one of the most frustrating things is when your primary contact is not open to looping others in. In my experience, there are 3 reasons why this can happen. Either they're not serious about making a purchase and they just want to keep their knowledge up to date, or they don't trust you because you failed to build rapport with them, or the person you're talking to wants to seem competent internally by running the whole project themselves, which tends to happen often. Unless you're dealing with a small company, you'll need more voices at the table for the project to turn out well, and you can use this fact to your advantage in overcoming this objection. You can share a positive story, like how working with multiple stakeholders in the project helped increase the impact on the organization as a whole, or how leaving out stakeholders resulted in missed project deadlines. Sharing stories like these help build rapport whether you already built it with the customer or not. And if it turns out that they just want to lead the project themselves, you need to find out how you can enable them to make the sell at an arm's length away. If you end up doing that, just make sure to get their commitment to loop in the rest of the stakeholders as well after they made the initial presentation internally. And what if the customer tells you, I need to think about it, or I need to talk to my boss and get back to you? I lost many deals due to this objection, and it was usually because there was some value missing or the prospect perceived that they have better alternatives. Your best bet to turn things around from here is to go back to discovery, but that's super difficult to do because usually by this time the prospects have already made up their minds. So to have them come back to the table and open up, you need to challenge them. Here's one example. Most of the time prospects tell me they need to think about it. It's usually because they perceive there's some value missing or they're not quite sure that this is the right fit for them. What are some reasons you wouldn't end up buying our product? And because this objection tends to come down to missing value, you want to uncover what each stakeholder expects to happen from the ideal solution and then prove it out. We did this exact same thing for one of my favorite deals to date and ended up closing for $45,000 instead of $3,000 in a single month. After some digging, it turned out that the economic buyer wasn't satisfied with standard support SLAs. See, this customer was on the West Coast while our team was in Central Europe, and due to the 9-hour time zone difference, they were getting next day responses in the afternoon hours, which wasn't acceptable for them. After pitching premium support, they were still hesitant due to the 9-hour time zone difference, but we proved it out in 2 weeks, and 2 weeks after that we ended up closing the deal successfully. And there you have it! If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, check out some of my other content which will appear on either side, and subscribe for more content like this. See you next week.